Well, the United States could be counting the cost of this hurricane for years to come, as experts warn the damage and losses could exceed $40 billion. Well, for more, I'm joined by Chuck Watson, who's the Director of Research and Development at Enki Research, which tracks tropical storms and models the cost of their damage. Thanks very much indeed for being with us on the programme today. So give us a sense of how bad it's been. What's the scale of the damage, financially speaking?
Well, it looks like Ida's going to easily make it into the top 10 and possibly into the top 4 or 5 most costly hurricanes to hit the U.S. Right now, the initial computer models are saying about 40 to 50 billion U.S. dollars. Again, there's a problem. We're still in the very early assessment phase. So there's some critical pieces of infrastructure that we just don't know whether it survived or how much damage, particularly in the energy sector. The Louisiana offshore oil port is extremely critical. It took a direct hit. The eye of Ida went right across it. So there were probably 20-meter, possibly 30-meter waves and 250-kilometer plus winds striking the structure. So it's designed to handle extreme events, but that's an incredible amount of force on a vital piece. That's the only U.S. port that can handle these very large crude container ships, in other words, the super tankers. So that alone is responsible for about 15% of U.S. imports and exports from as far as petroleum goes. And then you get to onshore, there's about 2 million barrels per day of refining capacity that's offline. We really don't know how much of that was heavily damaged. The eye went right across a couple of fairly large refineries. There were some others that fortunately were out of that damaged swath. But until the engineers get out there and check those structures out, we're just not going to know. It's going to be a few unsteady days in the petroleum and commodities markets until we get a handle. This could be a 1-month problem, could be a 6-month problem.
And we know that power has gone to roughly 1 million homes. How hard is it to get that back up and running again, and what kind of problems could it cause in the meantime?
That's another huge aspect of this that is going to be a problem, because ordinarily you don't lose your primary transmission lines, the ones that go from the generators to the substations. The fact that that Entergy Louisiana has lost all of the connections to the New Orleans area is pretty astonishing. There had to have been multiple failures, and given the fact that the east side of the city really didn't have that harsh of conditions, it's a little surprising that there's a total outage. So it seems to me like some things broke that probably shouldn't have. Now, you can't even begin to start a recovery until you have electrical power. And as your reporter on the ground was noting, you've got a humanitarian problem starts to kick in, because ordinarily with electrical outages, it's what we call a last mile problem. Some parts of the city will have power, other parts won't. So you don't have to go all that far to find an open gas station or supermarket. But when an entire area loses it, then obviously it's a much bigger issue, because you have to go much further to get supplies if you even can. And it complicates the rebuilding effort. It complicates security and safety issues, because without power, you unfortunately tend to get a little bit of strife and looting and that sort of thing going. And fortunately, we haven't had any reports of that. But as time goes on and the rebuilding and recovery process gets delayed by the power outages, that becomes more likely. When we look at Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, it could be as much as 15–20% of the damage total was simply because it took so long to get the electric grid back up.
And Chuck, this is an area that is still recovering from Katrina 16 years ago. So how long do you think this recovery will take?
Well, unfortunately, the Louisiana coast, not just this area because of Katrina, but of course last year with Hurricane Laura, it's been hit with multiple storms the last decade and a half. And so it's never really recovered from the previous event before the next one hits. The other complicating factor is each one's crossing a slightly different area. So you've got multiple damage slots. And there's just not been an opportunity to really recover from the last storm before the next one hits. So that just creates a compounding problem.